unapologetic, unadulterated, and uncompromising. Greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world, and welcome back to the home, the haven, the stronghold, and the super fortress of intelligent Black thought. This is the BlackChannel.net Radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. And we'd like to welcome you back to the home of intelligent Black thought one more time here. Thank you very much for joining us this weekend as we commune with the brothers and the sisters from around the world. Few things on our mind here as always. I got a few things I want to talk about with you actually tonight. I have a few things in mind I wanted to discuss, so if you will bear with us, I definitely want to go over those things with you, and we can discuss them. First of all, the Associated Press, in case you hadn't heard, they had put out a story earlier today that it confirms, of course, what you've heard from me, what we were saying all along in Ferguson. They were trying to say, with the help of your president, the black face of white supremacy, as Reverend Pinckney so accurately described him, that the FAA, in an act of an illegal act of absolute tyranny, restricted airspace around Ferguson, Missouri back in August for 12 days in August, specifically to stop the media because they didn't, and the FAA went along with it. The Associated Press has audio recordings of FAA managers saying that they knew that it was simply because Ferguson police wanted to restrict police helicopters, that this was about keeping out the media. And the FAA aided and assisted and abetted with this crime. A no-fly order is supposed to be no flight, but you see there was a nearby airport, so they were trying to figure out, well, if it's a no-fly zone, we have to stop all aircraft in the area. How can we stop some aircraft and not others? Either it's a no-fly zone or it's a fly zone. So next time they want to talk about Egypt and Syria, next time they want to talk about Russia, we need to add to the list of human rights violators the United States government and the FAA in 2014. Repressive regimes. We need to talk about Barack Obama. Dictator and fascist in charge and oppressive regimes. We need to talk about that, brothers and sisters, if you're going to sit up here and attempt to say that you somehow are going to be the world's moral authority on these things. You have no authority. You are one of the chief violators. Just wanted to get that out there first. So now we have proof that the FAA, the federal government, and the Ferguson Police Department, this is white supremacy 101. When a black male commits a crime, he has no rights. He is presumed guilty, not until proven innocent, but he is presumed guilty until convicted. This is the way that white supremacy works. For those of you out there who claim that we were in a post-racial society, you look like some big dumbasses now. In another slightly more associated note, I was listening today, and you might have seen me post it up earlier, talking about Issa Rae And the mainstream media, even though she raised half what 7 a.m. did, we raised twice as much. The mainstream media is not talking about us. They're posting up about her again. She has a new project and they're salivating all over it. The corporate machine is hard at work. But you have to understand, we are not dependent upon the white corporate structure. This is black empowerment. And we are going to show them that you can try to hype her up and talk her up all you want to, but nothing beats the math. And you can't beat our math. I want them to keep talking about her. I want them to keep talking about other people. I want them to keep talking about everything except 7 a.m. I want them to keep doing that. That's what I want them to do. They are playing into my hands, into our hands, beautifully. Talk about your little darlings. Talk about your hand-picked heroes. Talk about the people that you cherry-picked and selected. You go right ahead. Go right ahead. That is exactly what I want from you. You are doing exactly what I want. Ignore us. Pretend we're not there. Act like you don't see us. Think that not mentioning us is going to make us disappear and go away. Don't monitor our movements. Don't warn people that we're coming. Don't blow our cover. Tell them that everything is just all right. Tell them that everything is just fine. Tell them that everything is A-okay. You go right ahead and you say that. You go right ahead and pretend you don't see us. You go right ahead and act like we're not there. Because you see, as I stated earlier today, the bigger the surprise, the bigger the shock, the bigger the impact. When we send everybody reeling. Because as you all know, in sports, in horse racing, in betting, in gambling, in competition, the biggest and most stunning victory is an upset victory. Especially an upset by the dark horse. In this case, you can call it the black horse. That's exactly the way I want it to be. Because this will be such a shattering, earth-moving shock to their systems that they wonder how is it that we built this thing right under their noses. And not only did they not know it was there, they're going to be scrambling around saying who in the hell was supposed to be in charge of making sure this kind of thing didn't happen. Why is it we didn't know? How far have they really gotten? How much progress have they really made? And if they're this strong without us, how in the hell do we stop them? We put out our coons and buffoons. We put out our entertainment. We put out our jigaboons and didn't move nothing. That's exactly what I want. So brothers and sisters, I just wanted to let you know on that front tonight, everything is proceeding precisely according to plan. Everything. Everything. Now, I know that some of you are going to say that I'm a day late and a dollar short, but I saw something. I saw something that dovetailed with what I was speaking about last night, about how we need to learn to appreciate the truth when we hear it. I'd heard something. And I want to go over that with you here tonight because it was something else I saw last night that just really, really reinforced that for me. And I'm going to play something here. I haven't played this in a while. But for those of you who've never heard it before, this is the beginning, the first minute and a half from the Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, Martin Scorsese movie, The Departed. And I want you to listen to this real quick here because this really, for me, the first minute and a half, it was worth the price of admission just to get the first minute and a half. Just for that. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and play that audio for you here now.
I don't want to be a product of my environment. I want my environment to be a product of me. Years ago, we had the church. That was only a way of saying we had each other.
But now, I don't know. It's a funny thing. I put hate in your heart.
The Knights of Columbus were real headbreakers, true guineas. They took over their piece of the city. 20 years after an Irishman couldn't get a fucking job, we had the presidency. May rest in peace. That's what the niggers don't realize. If I got one thing against the black chappies, it's this. No one gives it to you. You have to take it.
That was the first minute and a half from the movie The Departed. And I have to tell you that just that first minute and a half, that really was classic by itself. It was worth the price of admission all on its own. If you really needed a more reason than that to watch it, you probably lack the intellect to be able to even appreciate what you just heard. As I explained to you all years ago when I first started playing that clip for you, you have to understand that these are white men who wrote and directed these movies. But Martin Scorsese put that beginning in there. And you have to understand, there were no prominent blacks in the movie The Departed. It basically was about like 1970s, right after desegregation, Boston. So the black population was nothing to talk about. You only had one black person in the entire movie, Anthony Anderson. And to be totally honest, his was a throwaway character. There was no reason for him to be there. Scorsese was making a point, however. Scorsese was making a point. He put that in there as a message not to white folk, because it was white folk who were coming to see the movie, but he put that in there as a message to a group of people who you wouldn't even have thought would be on his mind doing it. He put that line in there for black folk who came to watch that movie. Because he had done Gangs of New York. Which was about the Irish. And here we go back to The Departed, which is once again about the Irish. A group of individuals who were discriminated against here in America. Not as badly as black people, but they had a very rough time of it. Particularly in the late 1800s. And the discrimination against them continued even into the 1900s. And he was making the point during those scenes. He made the point during that particular scene. That was the Irish talking to the only group of people in America who haven't gotten it yet. And I don't blame him. I appreciate the fact that he gave it straight, no chaser. Understand, that was Martin Scorsese talking. It was Jack Nicholson's reading the words, but that was Scorsese talking to you. If I got one problem with, that's what the niggas don't understand. If I got one problem with the black chappie, it's this. Nobody gives it to you. You have to take it. But you see, Martin Scorsese cannot get up at the Academy Awards and say that I have not made a movie about black people because black people have not accomplished enough in America for me to make a movie about them. They are still in the process of overcoming because they are doing everything wrong. They are going to the people who have enslaved and oppressed them and looking to those people to give them the answer and the solution to their dilemma. And I can't make a movie about the virtues of people who are doing that. They're spinning their wheels and asking why I won't make a movie about them because you haven't accomplished enough. You have not accomplished enough to warrant a movie about it. The Irish overcame their circumstances. The Italians overcame theirs. The Asians overcame theirs. The Latinos have broken out ahead of you at this point. You have not done enough to warrant such a movie. And this was him, a man with no dog in the fight and nothing to lose, in a moment of unapologetic candor, telling you that you all don't get it. Nobody gives it to you. You have to take it. And that's why you are not respected, because nobody gives it. You gotta get up and get it. Nobody hands it to you. As a matter of fact, the only thing their hands will do is attempt to deprive you of it. You're gonna have to grab them by the wrist and maybe by the throat. And you are going to have to take not what you are owed, not what you deserve. You are going to have to take what you want. And most of the time, you're going to wind up having to take what you need. That was a white man who could not make a whole movie about what he was trying to say. He had to speak in code. He had to speak in an indirect fashion. But, for black folk, black folk are so scared today and so scary, you can't even be indirect like that. He basically had to sit here and say it to you, making it seem like it was roundabout, and in reality, it was not. That was directly aimed at black folk who you would have thought, and you'd be correct, were a minority of the audience. There was no real black audience for The Departed. Some folk have seen it, some haven't. But that movie was not aimed at a black audience, and yet Scorsese went out of his way to interject that verbiage in there. Why? Because he did have something to say to us. You're talking about all these other people, the Italians, the Irish. You've never said anything about black folk, and he was letting you know, I haven't said anything about you because he makes movies about ethnic groups who take what's theirs. That's what Scorsese does. He makes movies about ethnic groups who show that they got the guts to stand up and take what is theirs. And black folk ain't done that. You can't show us where we've done that. We got a bunch of cowards that you call preachers praying their asses off every time something happens because they're afraid and they ain't gonna take nothing, but they will take all the bull that white folk throw on them. You got your parents, the civil rights generation cowards, your parents, who dance a jig and buck dance and sing every time Mr. Charlie or Miss Ann walks in the room. They yell and scream and scorn at you, but the white folks show up and it's all smiles, like Jesus himself is in front of them. Nobody's going to make a movie for you. Nobody is going to make a monument extolling the virtues of you. That ain't worthy. You got a bunch of folk who haven't accomplished anything asking why come they can't get any accolades because you have nothing to talk about. You can't make a movie about black folks' major accomplishments of the last 50 years. You don't want to talk about what's been happening the last 50 years. You don't really want to go into that. You all want to sit up here and try to reclaim Egypt. Look how far you have to go back before you can name a notable accomplishment. That is shameful. That is disgraceful. Got black folk here today starving, can't get nothing, police oppressing you, but the buck dancing and the singing and the samboism rides on unabated. And that's why they make no movies for you. And you complain. And even the movies about your ancestors, they replace them with themselves. Why? Because at this point, and I will say it, and I don't give a damn who it upsets, at this point, they have more in common with the spirit that built the pyramids than this sorry, pathetic, sad excuse for a peoples that we have running around the continents, plural, today. These broken and demoralized individuals who at this point have neither the faculties nor the desire to honor their ancestors who created math and the sciences and the arts and metallurgy and architecture and building design and engineering. These people spend day and night trying to figure out how we built the pyramids. All we talk about is my yacht as a segue to trying to get some hood rat slut to take her drawers off. You're a queen, goddess. You're a queen. You're a goddess of fertility. And you have to prove your fertility by sleeping with my dusty ass. Nobody is going to make a monument to your honor, with coonery and buffoonery being your only real accomplishments. Last night, quite by accident, as I was sequestered with individuals trying to talk some sense into some folks, and they were watching, and I wound up watching most of it. Not all of it. I didn't get to see all of it. But I saw most of Django Unchained last night. Yeah, I know I'm hella late. When I say I don't watch movies and I don't watch TV, I mean I don't watch movies and I don't watch TV. By the time I watch a lot of these movies y'all talk about, they're already classics. Well, I saw it last night. And I have to say that movie was nothing short of a social commentary by Quentin Tarantino, most of which I absolutely approved of. Most of it. I will not say it is required watching. I will not say it was his best work. It is neither. But I will say, as an artistic achievement for what he was trying to do, it certainly accomplished the goal. It wasn't great, it wasn't wonderful, it wasn't his best work. I wouldn't even say it was his second or third best work, but I will say for what it was, he certainly accomplished what he wanted to do. Now, I want to walk through that tonight as a exposition here and an elaboration upon what I first started speaking about last night, about we should learn to appreciate the truth. Now, I'm pretty sure that a lot of folk have had a lot to say about this movie in the meantime, but as you all know, you have not heard and you have not seen what you need to see until the Authority speaks on it. And I think I'm going to go into some things tonight that you've never heard anywhere else, and it's good, you should. By the way, first of all, starting from the beginning of it here, this is a movie. It's not a documentary. People tend to forget that when they go to the movies. The purpose of a movie is to entertain, not to dramatize actual events, people. So you cannot judge a movie against the standards of a dramatization of history or a documentary. That is not what a movie is. It is not here to accurately portray all of the historical nuances. It is for the purposes of being able to tell a story. That's the purposes of it. Now, you'll remember about the beginning of the movie when Django is chained up and everything. You'll remember that. I want you to remember that part because I'm going to come back to that. I want you to remember it. I want you to remember that. Now, first of all, I want to deal with the end. Or should I say more towards the ending? No, let's not start there. Let's start with a part that bothered a lot of people. I think that Django Unchained set a new world record for saying the word nigger in a movie. I think that film set a new world record. Outside of the white supremacist produced rap albums, I think that one made a new world record. Most times saying nigger in a movie. Right up there with Blazing Saddles, by the way. But there was a reason that Tarantino did that, and I would think that it would be rather obvious why he insisted on doing that. By the way, I do give spoilers during tonight's broadcast about Django Unchained, so if you have not seen Django Unchained, you probably want to just tune out tonight's broadcast until you have, because I will be giving spoilers about it from the beginning to the end. So if you haven't seen the movie and you do want to see it, tonight you want to skip tonight's broadcast. Because if you hear me first, the movie will be very anticlimactic for you. So I'm just letting you know right now. This is your opportunity right now to leave, because everything else I talk about will be spoilers. So just understand that I'm just letting you know right now, this broadcast is going to ruin the movie for you if you have not seen it. Just letting you know. Now, the reason why Tarantino had all these people saying nigger throughout the movie, did you notice that pretty much everybody uses that word throughout the whole movie? All the white folk, everybody. It's just like making black men wear a dress in Hollywood. In this movie, all the white folk had to say nigger. And the reason that Tarantino did that, I'm sorry, there were a couple of notable exceptions in the movie to saying that word. There were a couple of people who didn't. I'll come back to that later as well. But practically all the white folk in the movie have to say nigger. And the reason that Tarantino was doing that was, a lot of you are ridiculous about some of this stuff here, because you're taking these movies as if these are literal to life, and they're not. The reason for it is Tarantino was trying to illustrate that this is the environment and nobody is inoculated or separate from this environment of white oppression of black people. That everybody is tainted by it. Everybody is a part of it. That the culture itself is the conspiracy. That's the point. He is saying to you that everybody of this era is a part of it. Everybody. And that's why it's being presented to you in that way, to let you know that everybody is in on it. Everybody. Nobody is on the good side of this. He's letting you know just in case you thought for a moment that, well, maybe these folks over here are okay. Everybody is saying that to you, to reinforce to you that there are no good guys around here. That's the point he was trying to make. He's a white man, and even he is having to tell you that you ain't got no friends. You're looking for a friend. You ain't got one. When we meet the character of Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, I wonder if some of you noticed a couple of incidental characteristics about Mr. Calvin Candy. Did some of you notice some of the incidental characteristics about him? Alright, a lot of you may have missed that. There were some incidental characteristics about Mr. Calvin Candy, and a lot of you missed it. It was oblivious, flew over your heads, whatever the case might be. First of all, did you all notice Mr. Candy's appearance? In case you didn't notice, Mr. Candy, and this is, well, you know what? Believe it or not, I'm kind of ahead of myself. Some people contacted me today, and they were saying on my post, they were talking about the fact that as we go through the movie, that Jamie Foxx did not kill Calvin Candy. But there's a specific reason why the events went the way that they did. Now, do I think it was the best storytelling? Not necessarily, no. But I understand now why Tarantino did it the way he did. It came to me really rather immediately. But the reasoning for it is because that was not his purpose. The events happened exactly the way they had to happen because there was a point that Tarantino was trying to make. Calvin Candy, if you'll all remember, right down to his hair. They even colored DiCaprio's hair if you take a look at it. If you'll notice, DiCaprio's hair had a slightly reddish tint to it. And if you'll notice the suit that he's wearing, also, whether it's the filters or whatever, has a slightly reddish look to it. And then you take a look, and particularly the scene where DiCaprio is at the table with the skull of old Ben, talking about how Ben used to take care of his grandfather and his father and him. If you'll notice in that scene in particular, did you take a look at Leo DiCaprio's hair? And most importantly, did you take a look at his beard? He's not just wearing any old kind of beard. He is wearing a spaded beard. A little more gussied and spruced up, but he's wearing a spaded beard. A man in a red suit with red hair and a spaded beard. A person could be forgiven for inferring or assuming that this man is meant to be the manifestation of Mephistopheles himself. Mephisto himself. That Calvin Candy represents the devil. Or should we say, devilishness. Calvin Candy is an unabashed slaver. And when he sits there talking about the virtues of his granddaddy and his daddy and himself, he is telling you that he is all of the above. I am all of them sitting right here. I have enslaved you. I have killed you. I have raped you. I have sold you. I have destroyed you for fun and profit. It gives me great glee and pleasure to be able to do so. There is nothing redeemable about Calvin Candy. But understand something. Just like Baines from the movie Malcolm X, Calvin Candy is a composite character. He represents an experience, not a person. Calvin Candy represents America's history of slavery that wanted it. He represents America's history of slavery, the part of American history that wanted it, that desired it, that was hungry for it, that found it to be delicious. That is what Calvin Candy represents. All of the evils of it. Everything about America that liked slavery. Nothing redeeming about it. He didn't try to make him into a good thing. You're getting ahead of us in the chat room, by the way. But now that I've said it like that, the way that the events went down should start making more sense to you. That Calvin Candy is Mephistopheles, or more importantly, he is the sinful, tainted nature of America that desired slavery. He is the white man who desired the evils and the sin of slavery. The counterpart to the white man who desires the evils of slavery is not the black slave. The black slave is not the counterpart to the white man who desires slavery. The counterpart to the white man who desires slavery is the white man who does not. Is the white man who has rejected it. That is the counterpart to the white man who desires slavery. Not the black slave, not the black man who has freed himself from slavery. And that brings us to Mr. Schultz. Dr. Schultz is the other side of the Calvin Candy equation. Now, if you'll all remember, Doc Schultz is wearing what? Doc Schultz is wearing a light gray suit. He's got his gray beard and his light gray suit. Now, Quentin Tarantino could not have put Doc Schultz in a white suit. Why? Two reasons. First of all, the time period. Second of all, Doc Schultz's profession. As you know, Doc Schultz was a bounty hunter, and as you can see in several of the scenes, he's required to get down on the ground, get down on his knees, so on and so forth. In a white suit, that would be tacky. So you see, we couldn't put him in a white suit because of his profession. Furthermore, back during that time period, as a matter of course, you didn't wear white suits. If he walked on a plantation with a black man wearing a white suit, well, that's what the colonels wore. So that would basically be having him dressed up as if he's a plantation owner. Juxtapositioning that against Django, that would just be weird to look at that. That would be weird. It'd be strange. So no, he couldn't dress in all white. Quentin Tarantino came as close as he could. He put Doc Schultz in a light gray suit. But if you picture Doc Schultz in your mind with a white suit, so you have this white man with a gray beard and a gray suit, I guess if he came out looking like the architect from The Matrix Reloaded, I guess that would have been a little too obvious to you all. So that when you saw Calvin Candy sitting on one side of the table wearing red with his devilish beard, and Doc Schultz on the other side of the table wearing white with this classic God image of a gray beard, I think that would have been a little too obvious. Most people would have figured out as soon as those two met that this movie is going to end not with Django face to face with Calvin Candy. You would have realized that it will be Doc Schultz who comes face to face with Calvin Candy in the end. That this is not about Django overcoming Calvin Candy, that this is about Doc Schultz doing it. But that would have been too obvious, and that violates one of the first primary rules of storytelling, that your story cannot be predictable. So Quentin had to throw you a slight curve so that you couldn't predict how the movie was going to end. But other than that, you would have immediately known what the movie was really about, because you all thought that the movie was about Django Unchained, and that is not what the movie was actually about. This movie was about the moment that Doc Schultz comes face to face with Mephistopheles, because Doc Schultz represents the American experience moving away from slavery. If you'll remember, in the beginning of it, Doc Schultz, he tells them all, gentlemen, I don't really care if you stay slaves or if you don't. And you actually see this type of archetype in other movies and other TV shows. Boardwalk Empire. Nucky Thompson is not an anti-racist individual. He's all about self-interest. He doesn't really care for Chalky White, the black gangster on the show, for those of you who haven't seen it. He doesn't really care for Chalky. He gets along with Chalky. Chalky does business in his domain. But it's not because he has some love of Chalky. And when Dr. Narcisse shows up, you find out he tells Narcisse, I don't care which one of you is running the beer rackets here, so long as I get my cut. I don't care. He has no special affinity or affection for black people. There is no Christian goodness in his heart for it. He's into his self-interest. And you are not a essential component in his self-interest. So as you'll all remember, Doc Schultz makes it clear when he frees Django and the other slaves. He takes Django, but he tells the rest of them, now, you can do whatever you want to do. That's up to you. But, by the way, you do have options. And if you'll also remember when he talks about going to Mississippi with Django, he tells him specifically, I have absolutely no intention of getting killed in Chickasaw County, Mississippi. He is not interested in some holy mission with Django. He takes Django with him because they're going into the winter months. He takes Django with him because they're going into the mountains. We're going into the cold. And he's going after gangs of people. So you see, he brings this partner with him who's not going to be trackable like that. If Django gets into trouble, you'll be okay. Django is expendable. He's only giving him a small cut of the reward money anyway. But the partner you've brought with you is expendable. And you're going to be taking on gangs of people. Now, one Doc Schultz versus gangs of people, those are not great odds. Now he's got a partner. He has started to disseminate the risk and distribute the risk. Now he's got some help. And that was the reason for teaming up with Django. Then he makes the decision to try to help Django recover his stolen wife. And that is what brings us to Calvin Candy's plantation. But as you'll all remember, when they show up there, Quentin Tarantino does not stop with the symbolism. First thing they meet is a Mandingo fighter who had run away, and they caught him. The dogs had him cornered and pinned up in a tree, named D'Artagnan. Now, you all know D'Artagnan, the name D'Artagnan from the Three Musketeers. That symbolism couldn't be any more obvious. And as you know, they have to sit there and watch as D'Artagnan is torn apart by a pack of dogs. As Calvin Candy, the devil himself, sits there laughing as he looks on. Laughing about it. Django is only slightly bothered by it. Doc Schultz is passively bothered by it, but this will not be the last time. This will not be the final time. Now, as you all will remember, what inevitably winds up happening is that their plan to get Broomhilda is figured out by the house Negro, Stephen, played by Samuel L. Jackson. Well, they wind up paying for Broomhilda. They wind up paying a lot more for her than they ever intended to pay. With guns pointed at their heads, by the way. Now, Quentin Tarantino, to his credit, the character of Stephen, most black people would never have done that, by the way. Black folk have made movies. We've never made a character like Stephen. It is painful for us to think about, and it is painful for us to accept that slavery could not have happened were there not so many willing collaborators sitting in our midst. Some of you, your great-great-great-granddaddies, they were Stephen. Some of you, your daddy was Stephen, by the way. Just thought I'd throw that in there for you. For a lot of you, your ancestor was Stephen. He was the one in the house doing all the dirty work, looking for Massa to give him a pat on the head, sowing seeds of dissension, pointing out the people that Massa could punish so that he would remain the top nigga in the house. There are a lot of you whose great-great-grandparents were Stephen, and you don't want to think that that shamefulness is in your family, but it is. But it is. And Quentin Tarantino is simply showing you and illustrating to you that, oh, he knows it's there. You see, white folk know what they did to enslave you. They know what they did. They know all those things that happened. They don't have to talk about it because they're the ones who did it. You're the one who doesn't want to talk about it. You're the one who wants to forget. You're the one who wants to pretend like it never happened. But they don't have a problem with that. They know what they did, and they know what your people did. And Tarantino comes back to this. Tarantino comes back to this when Calvin Candy takes out the skull of old Ben. And he said the only part of that movie that was really directed towards black folk was Calvin Candy's speech about old Ben. That was really the only part about that that was directed at black folk. Where he talks about old Ben took care of his granddaddy and his daddy, and before he keeled over me. And he said, but right out there on that porch, 3 times a week, for 50 years, old Ben here would shave my daddy with a straight razor. Now, if I was old Ben, this is Calvin Candy talking now. Calvin Candy talking, saying, now, if I was old Ben, I would have cut my daddy's damn throat, and it wouldn't have taken me no 50 years to do it neither. Those are his exact words. That line was directed directly at black people. That line was a message to black folk around the world, and particularly in America, that, by the way, as white men, by the way, if that had been us, we wouldn't have been shaving his face with no damn razor. You see, there's a reason why men like George R.R. Martin put scenes like that in their books. When they did the flaying of, I forget who his name was off the top of my head. But he was Brandon's, one of the Starks brothers' buddies. He was from the Iron Kingdom. And they had finished mind bending him to the point that he would shave them with the razor. And that he wasn't even afraid to give the guy a straight razor to shave him with, because he knew that as Reek, which is what they renamed him, he wouldn't do anything to him. He was broken. He was completely broken. And they had nothing to fear from him. That betrayal wasn't even a part of his character anymore. I think Capricorn said Theon. I think that's right. Greyjoy, that's the name I was trying to remember, was Greyjoy. Theon Greyjoy. That he was so broken. That you could even give him a razor at the throat of the men who had tortured him, castrated him, ripped fingers off, that he was so broken that he was no longer even capable of expressing any type of hostility towards them. That when Roose Bolton's bastard son, after his bastard son had done all this torturing of him, that he was no longer a threat on any level. And what Tarantino was telling you all was that, by the way, that was what we did. And just so you know, if it had been us, it never would have made it that far. If you'll notice that you keep seeing this come up in Anglo writings. They do one of two things with their slaves. They kill them or they break them. And you see this breaking process come up over and over and over again. In Roots, for example, I know not written by white folk, but the point is, the first order of business is to break them. The first order of business is to break you. And when he sits there and tells you that if I had been the one holding that razor, I'd have cut his damn head off, and it wouldn't have taken me no 50 years to do it either. It wouldn't have taken me no 50 years. So I guess Quentin just had to spell it out for you. He just had to come right out and tell you, fine, since subtlety probably doesn't work for you folks very well, if it had been us, his head would have been rolling the first time, and it wouldn't have taken us no 50 years to do it. That was the only part of that movie that was directly talking to black people. There really wasn't any other part that was doing that. That sailed over a bunch of people's heads. A lot of you were so determined to be offended that, by the way, you missed that part, the whole significance of it, right over your heads. Boing! That was exactly what happened to a lot of you there. And for many black people, it had to be explained and broken down just like that. That Mephistopheles, the devil, in full regalia, with his red suit, and a saw in his hands, and your skull on the table in front of him, with blood streaming from his hands to show you how bloodthirsty he is, because black folk don't take subtlety. You see, the problem is black people are so cowardly today that we will refuse to recognize a white person as a racist if they don't call us nigger. Do you understand that there are plenty of black folk who would say that Calvin Candy, even with his plantation, even with his slaves, even with his debauchery, if he had not called them nigger, you never would have acknowledged him as racist, by the way. Most black people are so cowardly and so afraid to confront white supremacy that if a white person doesn't just outright call you nigger, you will make up every excuse and every rationalization that you can to say that, well, he didn't mean it like that. He's not all bad. He's not really racist. He doesn't really have anything against me. This is about something else. Well, what else is it about? I don't know, but it's not about me. It's about something else. So you see, Calvin Candy had to sit there and be so over the top because most black people are so afraid and so cowardly today that they will not acknowledge the simple and obvious truth sitting in front of them. If he weren't sitting there screaming at the top of his voice, if he weren't sitting there screaming and screeching with blood on his hands, you never would have acknowledged it. Never. Because you are too cowardly and too afraid to acknowledge it. Because once you acknowledge it, then you have to do something about it. And black folk are terrified to actually do something about it. And that was why he said, if it had been us with a razor at my enemy's throat, he'd have been a dead bastard, and it wouldn't have taken me no 50 years to do it neither. And you should be ashamed that he's able to say that, and it's the truth. You should be ashamed that he is able to say that, and it's true. That should have been a lie. We should have had heads rolling all over plantations in the South, and yet we didn't. But yet we didn't do that. And you want to get mad at Tarantino because he just tells you what the truth is? Now, after they get the bill of sale for Brunhilde, you'll remember that Schultz is sitting there in the parlor with Candy's sister playing Beethoven's Für Elise. Once again, another bit of symbolism. As we all know, Beethoven has suspected mixed ancestry with black people. Of all the things she could have played, Beethoven, Tarantino is being none too subtle. And you notice that Doc Schultz is having flashbacks to when he saw D'Artagnan be ripped apart by the dogs. You see, Doc Schultz represents white people's experience in America of being indifferent to slavery, of being indifferent to the suffering of black people. That you see it and you watch it and you know it's going on, but you remain indifferent to it. That is what Doc Schultz represents in Django Unchained. Doc Schultz represents white people's experience of being indifferent to the suffering of black people. And sitting in there after having Calvin Candy mistreat him and point guns at him and seeing the debauchery and the barbarism, Doc Schultz is finally faced with it. That he can no longer pretend that he has not seen what he's seen. Because up until that point, he was a guy who just let experiences roll off his back. People have been pointing guns at him and everything else. But nothing bothered him until now. That he realizes that indifference isn't really an option for him anymore. So he gets up and goes to the library, to which Calvin Candy comes walking through the door. And he tells Candy that, I doubt Alexander Dumas, and he tells him Alexander Dumas was black, I doubt that he would approve of what you did to D'Artagnan. This was the scene that the whole movie was coming up on the very next scene, where Doc Schultz is getting ready to walk off with Django and Brunhilde, and that's when Calvin Candy stops them. And this, for those of you who thought Django Unchained was about Jamie Foxx, this was the scene that threw a lot of people, because they wanted Django to be the star of the movie, and they did not understand that, yes, it's called Django Unchained, but the point of this film was not Django. The point of this movie was this moment where Calvin Candy, Mephistopheles, the devil himself, the American acceptance of the barbarism of slavery, racism, white supremacy, and all of its evils, stands there in one part of the room. If you take a look, the surroundings around Calvin Candy were dark, much darker, almost like a cave. The library is darker. Where Django and Doc Schultz were in the parlor is light. Go back and take a look for yourselves. That room was light colored. But where Mephistopheles, where Calvin Candy is standing in the library, much darker. Basically just candlelight. Doc Schultz standing in the light. Calvin Candy standing in the darkness. And then Candy says it. He makes the demand that you, Doc Schultz, have to shake my hand before we will allow you to leave. Doing it once again. The devil is demanding the Faustian bargain. He is demanding that before you can walk off with these people, you have to accept me for what I am on my level. You must accept me. That is the whole purpose of that scene. The whole purpose of that scene is for the whole purpose of the movie was to bring you to the point where you see Doc Schultz, white indifference, finally waking up to the evils of slavery and racism and white supremacy, coming face to face with the full acceptance of it. And the question is, who will win? Who will prevail? And he tells Candy tells him that you have to come shake my hand. Remember the writing of the Constitution, the 3/5 compromise. And that was what the country did for hundreds of years. Compromised. Every time the devil gave them a bargain, they compromised. They shook hands on it. They walked away from the table and were at best, nobody was righteous. At best, they were indifferent to the suffering of black people. They were indifferent to it. At every turn, they had chosen to shake the devil's hand. Right up until the Civil War itself, and even after the Civil War, with the Great Compromise. Once again, we keep doing this over and over again. There is always some point along the line where Doc Schultz meets Calvin Candy and shakes his hand, symbolizing that he accepts you and respects you at some level, that the two of you can coexist. And the point that Quentin Tarantino wanted to make with that scene was that Doc Schultz represents the evolution of white people in America, that they no longer will abide by or condone coexisting with the Calvin Candy side of their psyche. that I have to make a choice whether I'm going to coexist with you. Because if I shake your hand, that is a symbol of agreement, of acceptance, that the two of us have mutual respect and we can coexist. And that is why when Doc Schultz takes the gun out and shoots Calvin Candy, he was the one who had to do it. Because Django already understood that he could not coexist with Calvin Candy, but this movie was not about exploring Django's inability to coexist with Calvin Candy. It was about Doc Schultz understanding that he could not coexist with this other white man. That was the point. That is why Django could not do it. If you all want to know why it was that Tarantino wrote it that way, it was because the point was Doc Schultz. And most of you went there to go see Jamie Foxx. As black people, you didn't even follow the story of Doc Schultz in the movie. You didn't realize the evolution that he takes from being indifferent about black people, not concerned, I am not gonna die in Chickasaw County, Mississippi, to in one day he makes the decision to leave it all there because he understands he and I cannot coexist. He and I cannot coexist. I have leveraged and bargained as much of my soul away as I care to do. I am not going to pretend that I don't see the devil standing right in front of me any longer. He had met the devil. He had seen the devil. They shook hands the first time. But there will be no handshaking again. And that is why it was crucial and critical and essential to the point that he be able to do that. He had to have a way of being able to ignore that. He had to. He had to. It was imperative that he do that. So that was the reason for everybody who was wondering Django couldn't do this part. The movie wasn't about Django overcoming Calvin Candy. This was about the spiritual battle between those two aspects of the American psyche. And that Doc Schultz was willing to do something that his ancestors and forebears had been afraid to do and unable to do. That he was willing to die. That he was willing to give up everything he had to destroy this. Something that his forebears and his ancestors had been unable to do. You all thought the movie was about Jamie Foxx's character simply because it was called Django Unchained. But if you take a look at even the DVD covers and the poster for the movie itself, you see Doc Schultz sitting right there. You'll see 3 people on the cover there. If you take a look at it, Tarantino is showing you. Don't believe me, go take a look at the cover, the DVD covers for yourself. You see Jamie Foxx in the middle. And on Jamie Foxx's right, I believe it is Doc Schultz. And who is on Jamie Foxx's left? Symbolism indeed. But you see, if Tarantino had given that away early, you might have figured out what he was really trying to do in this movie and the points he was really trying to make. He did it so that you would understand the point that he was really trying to make only after the fact. He still got movies, though. When you think of it in that context, now you realize why he wrote it the way he did and why he insisted on that. Now, the next order of business here is, if you'll all remember, Steven is sitting there just screaming and crying when Calvin Candy finally meets his deserved end. Steven is just crying and boo-hooing. So the person who would actually save Steven gets killed, but Steven is mourning the man who held him in slavery. And you know why that is? Because there is no such thing as slavery to a house nigga. Get that through your heads, people. Once a person has sold out, he is no longer a slave. He is a collaborator. He is on their team. He now no longer wishes to leave. Steven was not a slave anymore. He was a part of Calvin Candy's plantation. You all spent so much time focusing on the bed wench. But the truth of the matter is, at the end of the movie, you'll remember that scene as well. We'll come back to that as well. But it should have been obvious to you. Steven was a part of the plantation. He was not a captive on it. Steven would not leave the plantation even if Calvin Candy died. Steven was not trying to leave. He was a part of it, and we are afraid to face that part of our history. We are afraid to face those things. Now, Django goes on, as you all know. They capture Django and they sell him to the mining company. And Django is being transported to the mining company. You remember, they didn't even have him sitting in the wagon with the other slaves. They had him walking behind the horses. But he's being transported. He's being transported by 3 white men. And I want to go back and check on that. I don't want to say they were Irish if I'm not 100% sure. But I want to say from their accents that they were. Going back to Martin Scorsese again. Now you have to remember that for the Irish, they were undesirables. And that is why there was a lot of work that when it was time to pay people, the Irish were preferred to do it because these were jobs that were seen as extremely dangerous, and because slaves had to be paid for, people didn't want to lose that. Yeah, Ronan, I know their accent seemed Australian. That's really an odd thing to have that happen. That's really an odd thing. But because I heard Tarantino and I was like, that sounds Australian. But in a situation like that, where you're transporting those people, you're going to have your expendables do that. That's why trains, for example, they preferred certain people to do that. They preferred certain people to do that kind of work because you were seen as expendables. And if you'll notice, if I'm not mistaken, Quentin Tarantino does not refer to Django as a nigger. He doesn't say that word at all. Just thought I'd throw that little tidbit in there for you also. Now, this also is a moment that Tarantino brings you to recognize something. Do you all remember the first time you met Django? He was being transported in a line, in chains, led by the back of a horse. He was walking behind the horse. That was how you met Django. And the first time that he got out of those shackles, Doc Schultz took him out of those shackles. At the end of the movie, Django is in chains again. But there's no Doc Schultz this time. It's just Django. And yet, Django is able to figure out how to get himself out of those chains. Did you realize that? Did you catch that? The first time, he had to be liberated by a white man. But at the end of the movie, Django liberates himself. And the very first thing he does when he gets out of chains is he shoots the 3 white men. If you'll remember, that's the first order of business. Now, if you'll all remember, it's actually an archetype. The scene repeats itself. If you'll remember, at the beginning of the movie, the other slaves are freed and they kill the remaining overseer who had been left with them. At the end of the movie, there are no overseers. I mean, at this scene, at the end, there's no overseers to kill, but the cage to their wagon is left open for them to escape. At the beginning of the movie, it is a white man who liberates black people. At the end of the movie, the black folk have to do it themselves. I wonder if you caught that part. Now, there's also one other reason. Django could not kill Calvin Candy, because if Django had killed Calvin Candy, there's no way they would have let him leave that plantation alive. So you have to have a way for him to leave the plantation alive, otherwise this does not work. But the other reason, the bigger reason, is because of that. But if you wanted a secondary reason, it's also because they would have had to string him up. There's no way he could have left alive. But in any case, at the end of the movie, you notice that. Now, did you all notice this? Another bit of symbolism. Django takes the saddle off the horse. Bareback riding. Did you notice that? Now, I'm sure some of that was because they wanted to show that Jamie Foxx has gotten better at riding a horse. I mean, he was riding a horse at full gallop, by the way. Riding bareback at full gallop, that's pretty gutsy. That's pretty gutsy. But the other thing is, did you notice that when he was riding the horse, heading back towards Calvin Candy's plantation, did you notice that there's no saddle on the horse? There are no reins. No bridle on the horse. Did you notice that? There's no bridle on the horse. The horse is free. The horse has no saddle, no bridle, no reins, no anything. He gets on the horse, he grabs the horse by its mane, and he rides the horse with nothing but his guns. The horse is free. and Django is free. Quentin is throwing more symbolism in there in case the free aspect of it wasn't enough for you. Quentin was throwing some more symbolism in there just in case the free aspect wasn't enough for you. By the way, just in case you didn't get that. The cage for the slaves is open. The horse is without restraints. Django is unchained. Have gun is traveling. With the gun held up in the air. By the way, he's riding the horse with the gun held up in the air. That is the ultimate symbol of liberation. If you all don't remember Charlton Heston at the NRA with his famous speech when he held an old musket rifle in his hands. Hand high up in the air from my cold, dead hands. Now you see, there are a lot of you who are afraid of these things because you understand what it means. But that is the reason that Doc Schultz could not do this. There never would have been a scene of Django. That scene with Django on the horse could not have happened if he had killed Calvin Candy or if Doc Schultz was still alive. That scene could not have happened. That scene couldn't have happened. It couldn't have. Now, as you all know, Django gets back to the plantation and very quickly dispatches, he gets Brunhilde and very quickly dispatches with everybody. Except Stephen. Stephen is the last one. And if you'll all remember, Django shoots Stephen through the knees, but he does not actually kill Stephen along with everybody else. Now, there is one question that you all, most people watching this movie, I've never heard anybody ask this question before. There was something that you didn't notice. Everybody was focusing on Django, upset that Django didn't kill Calvin Candy. They wanted the satisfaction of Django killing Calvin Candy, and that's perfectly understandable. That's not unreasonable. That's perfectly understandable. But there's one thing that you all missed. Did you notice that Doc Schultz did not shoot Stephen? Did you notice that? Django doesn't kill Calvin Candy, and Doc Schultz does not kill Stephen. Quentin Tarantino is not done with parts of America that have to face their darker side. It is essential that Django has to take out Stephen, because Stephen is not Doc Schultz's demon to overcome. Stephen is ours. And the real question is, are you going to try to coexist with him? Doc Schultz's purpose was to stop Calvin Candy to save his own soul. And even though the choice is a lot easier for Django, his job is to overcome Stephen to gain back his own. For his wife, for himself. It is essential that the white man deal with his darker demons, and the black man must deal with his. In the case of the white men, his demon is his evil indifference to the suffering of black people. For the black man, it is his cowardice and submission to that evil. That is the part that you must overcome. Now, the scene leading up to that, if you'll all notice, they're leaving the funeral. Calvin Candy's sister and the rest of the folk, well, the remaining members of his plantation staff, and the house slaves. You notice the house slaves, Stephen, the big fat mammy, and the bed wench. All of them are walking back. They're singing the hymns for the white folk. You notice they're all wearing black. All of them. All of them are wearing black. All of them went to the funeral. All of them were mourning. All of them. Remember what I told you before, that this is symbolic, that they are a part of the plantation. They are not slaves. They are not captives. These are the individuals who settled and took the Faustian bargain of accepting becoming a part of the plantation. They are not fighting the system. They have become a part of the system. Another bit of symbolism. They are literally walking hand in hand with white supremacy back to the plantation. Literally. These are not slaves any longer. And that is the critical, crucial point that all slavery, racism, and white supremacy has been geared toward. The time that they break you. That they no longer need slaves, that you accept your second-class citizenship. That is what it was always about. And the question is, who defeats that? Doc Schultz can't do that. Brunhilde can't do that. Other slaves on the plantation, that's not for them to do that. Django's job is to overcome the force that put him on the plantation and kept him there. The force that put all of us there and kept and keeps all of us there. And what keeps us there, as articulated by Calvin Candy, isn't the white folk. Hell, they could even give you a weapon and stand still with the blade at their throats, and you won't move. That is what has enslaved you now. That is what enchained you. That is what imprisons you. You no longer need a plantation. You have created one. We no longer need chains. You've got something stronger than a chain holding you here. You have acceptance. You've told yourself whatever lie you need to tell yourself to rationalize why this is okay. I don't have to enslave you any longer. You have enslaved yourself. You have accepted life as my number two. You and I are going to get along just fine. You and I will coexist just fine. Just fine. The point of Django Unchained was to bring Doc Schultz to the devil. And to bring Doc Schultz face to face with the devil. And bring Django face to face with black people's cowardice, apathy, and acceptance of our own enslavement. That was the point. That was the purpose. You see, Brunhilde could not kill Stephen. because the point of it was for Django to do it. He had to do that because we are following his evolution. He is our cipher in this event. He is our avatar. He is the one who represents our experience, not Brunhilde. Brunhilde represents admixture. She represents what the plantations had done to us in the system. She represents that. Django represents the African and the African's experience. And are you ever going to get to a point where you stop asking for your freedom and you take it? And you deal with the forces inside your own sector that have been keeping you enslaved. That's the point. Now, a lot of folk were upset and a lot of people were offended by Django Unchained. I think the real issue is that there are a lot of scared black folk out there, and they did not like so many things being told by white folk. That hit a little too close to home because we like to pretend that white folk don't really know us. That's what we like to pretend. We like to pretend that white people don't really know us. That white folk don't really understand. And in 7 a.m., you all are going to see some things that let you know that how wrong you are about that. You're going to see some things in 7 a.m. to let you know that no, they know you much better than you ever thought possible. And a lot of you find that uncomfortable because you take comfort in the fact that you think there's some mystery about you. Black people think that poverty will protect us from racism. They think that ignorance will protect us from racism. They think that playing dumb and playing stupid makes us less of a threat and protects us from racism. That's what they think. And that's why we keep doing it. We keep pretending to be stupid because we figure that acting stupid will make us less threatening to white society. If a Negro can't read, then they won't come after us. That's what we tell ourselves. And that's a lie. It's an absolute lie. That is not going to protect you. We've told ourselves many fairy tales and many fantasies, all that come back to the same thing, that many of you are Stephen. Many of you are Stephen. Many of you are the cowardice and the fear that leads to somebody like that. Many of you are that. And they see it in you. They know it's there. That's why we had Ferguson and Eric Garner. Your fear emboldens them and encourages them. Like Calvin Candy, the more afraid you are, the more barbaric he gets. The more you let him get away with, the more he tries to get away with, until eventually he has broken you and made your lives a living hell. They know what's going on. And if you were honest with yourself and comfortable with the truth, you would accept that reality too, that they know what's going on and you know what's going on. Everybody knows what's going on, and everybody except white folk try to pretend that they don't know. Black people getting behind closed doors with each other and pretend we don't know what's going on. White folk just pretend they don't know what's going on around you. On last night's broadcast, I made the point that black people need to become comfortable when white folk tell them the truth. That we need to stop trying to get them to tell us a lie, the lie that we want to hear. You know what black folk really want? Black people want to forget as much as white bigots do. That's the real thing. Black folk are hoping that we can wake up one day and slavery, Jim Crow, all those things would just be a bad dream. That's what we want. We want to wake up one day and all that stuff will just be a bad dream. That we will wake up and we were never niggers, we were never slaves, we were never discriminated against, that we can be happily apathetic. That is what we really want. The bigots in America want black folk to forget about slavery, and guess what? Most black people want to just forget about it too. Not only do we want to forget about slavery, we want to forget about all the other characteristics surrounding it. Everything. We want it all. Let's just all pretend it never occurred. That's what we want. We want to pretend that these things never actually happened. As much as we get mad when white folks say, hey, that was back then, this is now. Guess what? Black folks say it even more. Black people want to forget. We want to give a pass. Doc Schultz refused to shake the hand of Mephistopheles. Doc Schultz refused to shake his hand. And the evil, cold truth of it is black folk can't wait to shake his hand. We just want to forget. We are willing to stay and live on the plantation as long as he gives us the ability to forget. We will let him break us as long as he grants us the serenity of allowing us to forget. If he just doesn't call you nigger, if he just doesn't call you that, you will accept all the other abuse because you've told yourself that those things didn't really happen. But when he calls you nigger, now you have to accept that, okay, it really did happen. It really is real. I really have let myself go this far. That's what happened. We want someone to grant us the ability to just forget. And that is why we don't like people telling us the truth. We don't appreciate it when white folk are honest with us about how they feel. Because when they are honest with us about how they feel, that reminds us. That reminds us of what we allowed to happen. That reminds us of what we are allowing to happen. That reminds us that they know what we really are and what we've really done and what we didn't do. And we are desperate to get people to stop seeing us that way. But we don't want to have to do what's necessary to take back our self-respect. We want people to give us respect that we haven't earned. And we are afraid to take the respect that we do deserve. And then now we've ended up with no respect from anyone, not even ourselves, not even our own children. We have no respect from anyone. Because we have refused to accept that that is not worthy of respect. So politicians lie to us, and black people are the folk most desirous to have politicians lie. You can't name a single good black politician in the history of America. You can't name one. Not in recent history, anyway. In the places where we've had power and control, you can't point to a black politician and say, that guy's kicking butt. He's doing gangbusters, man. You can't name a single one. Not even one. You can name a bunch of Negroes in nice suits. You can name chicks dancing the Dougie on the White House lawn. And their husbands singing minstrel shows, pretending to be Al Green. You can name that. You can name entertainers who tell us they're going to do something in our interest, but you can't name anybody who actually has. You can't name anyone who actually has. You can't do it. So white men like Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino have had to speak in code. And they do speak in code. Black folk used to know what code speak was too, by the way. Back on the plantations, we sang liberation hymns. White folk thought we were just singing. They didn't understand. We were singing liberation songs, the old 100s. White folk thought we were talking about heaven. We were talking about getting out of hell on this plantation. And we sang our liberation songs. White folk loved to hear us sing. We sang our liberation songs. We used to have a code. We used to understand the value of code speak. We used to understand the value of speaking a language that other people were not privy to, because that is what a powerful people do. A powerful people have secrets that protect their power, not secrets that protect their weaknesses. Black people are specialized in secrets that protect their weaknesses. I'm not fat, I'm thick. I'm not broke, I'm just transcending money. I'm not moist, I just like to wear pink and skinny jeans. We don't appreciate it when people tell us the truth. We better get used to starting to appreciate that. For all our sakes, we better get used to the idea of appreciating that. Because we have told ourselves so many lies. We've told ourselves so many falsehoods. And guys like Quentin Tarantino, they can drop hints here or there. They can tell you that Alexander Dumas was black. And in Reservoir Dogs, I believe it was, they talked about why the Sicilians are dark-skinned. But we can't depend on that anymore, people. We can't depend on that anymore. We know what the truth is. We know what the problem is. We have simply lacked the will to do what is necessary. We have, as a people, we lack the will to take control of our lives. And that's why Scorsese said, if I got one problem with you black chappies, it's this. You think somebody is gonna give you freedom, and nobody gives it to you. You have to take it. Did you notice that in The Departed, Scorsese never tells you what the it is? Nicholson says, if that's what the niggas don't understand, if I got one problem with the black chappie, it's this. Nobody gives it to you. You have to take it. But they never actually tell you what the it is that you have to take. They never actually define it for you. And the problem is that if he has to define it for you, it would not help to tell you. Nobody gives you power. You have to take it. Nobody gives you equality. You have to take it. Nobody gives you freedom, justice, and liberation. You have to take it. you have to take it. And he was telling you nobody gives it to you. And they will not respect you until the day that you show them that you are willing to take it. That's when they're going to respect you. That's when it's going to happen. It happens then. It happens then. And when you actually understand it, when you're actually serious about it, you're not going to be asking people to liberate you anymore. You won't be asking for empowerment anymore. You won't be asking for stores to spend your money at. You'll make your own. Building a black economy is the razor at the throat of white supremacy today. That is you holding the razor at their throats today. And you're supposed to swing that razor. You're supposed to slice that razor. And it ain't supposed to take you no 50 years to do it either. And this concludes tonight's broadcast of the BlackChannel.net radio. I am your host, your brother, your humble servant, the Black Authority. And until next time, brothers and sisters from around the world, remember, black is the future, and the future is uncompromising.